our Around the World segment tonight, 10 U.S. Navy sailors are missing after a Navy destroyer and a merchant vessel collided off Singapore. This comes almost exactly 2 months after a deadly collision between the USS Fitzgerald and a container ship. That collision left 7 Navy sailors dead. Following this most recent collision of the USS John S. McCain, Navy Admiral John Richardson ordered an investigation into how the Navy prepares its forces to operate in the Pacific. Which leaves us the question, how can we trust our Navy to defend us against North Korea when they can't even stop merchant vessels from ramming into them? Watch.
It happened in Malaysian territorial waters, specifically in Teluk Ramunia waters. And we have dispatched search and rescue assets on the ground.
With me now, retired Air Force Colonel and Chairman of Gator Pack, Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Liz.
Colonel, that's quite the disturbing footage to see that the huge hole in the John S. McCain, the USS John S. McCain, which doesn't even compare to the damage that we saw 2 months ago when the Fitzgerald was involved in this collision. But Colonel, I kind of want to dive right into the political aspect of this crash and ask you the question, how are we supposed to stop Kim Jong-un and his, nuclear warheads that he wants to launch at us at any moment? How are we supposed to use our Navy, our ships, to stop him when we can't even stop merchant vessels from colliding into our ships?
That's a great question. First of all, I'd like to say that we're all praying for the families and for the sailors that are missing and those folks. It's a pretty tragic accident, it looks like. But the Straits of Malacca is a very dangerous place. It has been for hundreds of years. And our sailors need to be properly trained to operate in that area, and even to transit it is actually a dangerous operation, and this is twice now. And I share your concern, especially now we have a guided missile destroyer, which is part of the network for missile defense in the region, and we've got to be able to have confidence at not just 90% or 95%, but at 100% that those systems are reliable and our sailors are properly trained, and that includes navigating in the area, including the Straits of Malacca.
Right, and I guess let me ask you. Let me go back to something you said about training. I mean, is this a matter of these Navy sailors? And I guess I say this with all due respect to the men and women in the U.S. Navy. Many close friends and family are in the U.S. Navy, serve aboard these very ships that we're talking about. But is it a matter of them not being trained properly? Is this a matter of budget cuts, not enabling them to have the resources they need to execute those things? What causes this? Because it seems like you'd be able to determine a merchant vessel coming towards you at a rate that, or at a collision rate far before it actually hit you. And I don't understand how we can not see that coming, but we could see a nuclear warhead.
Well, we've talked for years about the lack of readiness dollars and resources being applied to the operational forces that need to be ready to go to war. And that has been a major concern all the way through the Obama administration, and the services are not going to recover from that overnight. So that's number one. They do need to have proper resources and make sure that we're properly training them. And the investigation will look at all of those things. But in the Straits of Malacca, the high technology, the radars and the computers and those kind of things, the terrain is very difficult because it gets into the sides of the ship. And the radars aren't as effective. So it's a very intensive operation just to transit those straits. And I'm very concerned that there's something going on. We really need to look at even potential enemy action, because there could be some type of cyber operation happening that's causing our navigation systems and our guidance systems and our detection systems to be inoperative somehow. Because as I've said, the terrain is very close to the vessels there, and there's no telling what types of technology that could be being used against us. So we need to investigate thoroughly and make sure we're checking into all of those areas.
If that were the case, if it were cyber attacks or some type of cyber warfare interference in our systems, would we be able to determine that was the case and the cause?
Most of those digital components can be recorded. As a matter of fact, almost all of the digital components of combat vehicles nowadays can be recorded. So we should be able to analyze that data and see if there is any disruptions in the data or any stray data coming in that's not recognized. Absolutely.
Right, and I guess I want to go back to the training thing again. Like I said, you're the military expert here. You served many, many years on active duty. You've heard the same sort of stories, the same reports, off the record reports from active duty officers, aboard these type of vessels who talk about how short-staffed they are, how many hours they have to work, how few hours they're allowed to sleep, how their training is basically just a handoff as someone else leaves the ship. I mean, whose fault is that? Is that the fault of politicians being so wrapped up in political correctness, using resources to create, manuals on how to handle transgender military members versus equipping our Navy sailors with the resources and the training that they need to succeed? Whose fault is this, Colonel?
It is the politicians' fault. Our political leadership controls our military. In the executive branch, the president's the commander-in-chief and is responsible for making sure the resources are made available. But the Congress is responsible for making sure the president has those resources. So it's a team effort. And as we've been saying for many years now, those issues have been talked about by all of us commanders as we've left the military, that our operational and combat readiness is degrading by the day because our resources are not focused on that. They're focused on many of the things that you mentioned. And that's a tragedy that a sailor or soldier, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman give up their lives. Their families are broken forever because we didn't give them the right resources and we made them focus on things that didn't have anything to do with combat lethality. And that's what Secretary Maness and General Dunford have said that they were going to do is we're going to stop doing things that don't add to the combat lethality of the United States Armed Forces. And I am so glad that we are fortunate enough to have a team like that in charge and a president that's able to let them be in charge and do the right things by their men and women.
Right. Well, it's about time. I mean, that is what the military was made to do. They're made to be a fighting force. They're not made to be a social experiment. It is a tragedy. People are losing their lives because money is being allocated to political correctness instead of equipping these men and women who are fighting for our freedom to be able to do that without losing their life. I mean, I'm going to echo what you said. We are praying and thinking about these sailors that are currently missing, their families who I'm sure are waiting in agony, and the ones 2 months ago who lost their lives and the families who lost their loved ones forever. And we're going to do our best to ask these questions of our politicians to advocate for these Navy sailors so that this stuff doesn't continue to happen, because it is avoidable and that just compounds the tragedy. Colonel Maness